folks, we're back, and we're on the line with Jeff in Pennsylvania. I hope he's going to be patient with me because I'm not here to preach to the choir, and I like to prove my point. So you still there, Jeff?
Yeah.
All right, excellent. So what I'm going to do is they're going to bring up sections of my film. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I think a lot of the things I just addressed outside of the war games and Able Danger, just the hijackers being trained on U.S. bases, cultivated here, the FBI being stopped. The CIA was called on these guys by their neighbors, and they did nothing. Why would that be the case? Well, the facts are these guys were multiple agents. I would say Atta was really one of those guys that was probably working Mossad angle, ISI angle, and American intelligence to some extent. If you look at the funding of these hijackers, the only known funding we know about, because they always talk about Saudi Arabia, yet we didn't go into Saudi Arabia, but the $100,000 wire came from the Pakistani ISI, which was set up by British intelligence and then cultivated by the CIA in the 80s. That's on the Wikipedia page. It's not even denied. And we have such a tight-knit relationship with the ISI to this day. Are we ready with the clip? We're not ready? You need a couple more minutes on it? All right, so let me talk to you for a second, Jeff. What else would you say makes you think that Glenn Beck's a patriot? Because he exposes the Federal Reserve System?
Well, listen, how does war games on 9/11 prove that there was a conspiracy?
Well, hold on. It's not just the war games, man. Let me explain how this goes. All right, first they said there were no war games. Then there were war games, but the war games were shut down as soon as the attacks happened. So in other words, initially they deny them. Then they say they actually happened, but they said as the attacks occurred, they shut down the war games. Now, it took me until August of 2006 to actually be the first people outside of the media to get the official NORAD tapes. Okay, we petitioned NORAD forever to get them. Finally, they sent them to us on CDRs. I think it was it could all fit on one DVD, but they sent us 7 CDRs for some godforsaken reason. And they were DAT channels of all the things, and they admitted that they vetted them, but the majority of the stuff is there. And you go through these things, and first of all, Flight 11 is in the air for 45 minutes after it supposedly hits the North Tower. They're following it, okay? Second of all, Delta 1989 has a bomb on board, and it's unclear whether or not they're following that or Flight 93 is whatever goes down there. They have about, I think, from the tapes that I listened to, at least 5 other hijackings going on. Now, remember, the official story is that the 4 planes that were hijacked didn't emit hijack signals. It's mainline. Now, the other ones, the ones that were out of Korean airspace coming in, the ones that were coming out of Alaskan airspace and over Canada coming in, they did emit hijack signals. And then you listen to these tapes, and actually the war games went on for 20 minutes after the last attack. In other words, after Flight 93 was downed. And they actually had to call up Cheyenne Mountain several times and stay on the line for 20+ minutes after they called just to have them shut down the war games. So why do they do the war games? Because normal people who are in the military don't want to attack on 9/11. So if they think it's part of a war game scenario and say they're controlling a drone or a UAV or they're supposed to be in the area, in other words, if you're supposed to be an F-15 or an F-16 protecting a certain quadrant, a certain airspace, you're not there. You're running a war game. And that did happen. They shipped out the majority of fighters over to the East and West Coast, way off the East Coast, so they were off to the side. Now, let me tell you another lie we expose in this. They say that there were no military jets on the scene until, I believe it was 10 or 15 minutes after the second plane hits the World Trade Center. You watch Fabled Enemies, you see a white military jet on the scene of the World Trade Center prior to the second plane strike. And then you find out one of the drills they're running is a mass Armageddon drill where what they call doomsday planes or operational command centers for the shadow government. I know it's hard to believe, but the shadow government does exist. We document it thoroughly in this film as well. It's called Continuity of Government Program. And the shadow government is running war games, and they just happen to be on the scene of all the attacks. That's right. Not only are they in New York, but as the plane hits the Pentagon, all sorts of newsreels caught the same kind of doomsday plane at Washington, D.C. So they're on the scene at the attacks as they're happening, as these war games are going on. Nothing suspicious there. The hijackers are trained at U.S. bases. They're the FBI, Black Ops program, and it is a Black Ops program. Able Danger identifies them. CIA identifies them. Nothing is done. Not only that, and we won't be able to show this clip as well, but James Woods gets on a plane with Muhammad Atta and 3 other hijackers prior to 9/11. James Woods, the pilot, and a stewardess all fill out separate FAA reports that they thought they were going to hijack the plane. This is in August, right before the attacks, and nothing is done to these guys. If that report were filed against you in 2000 or me in 2000, you don't walk out of the airport. I promise you that. You walk into an FBI interrogation room. Now hold over. We're going to play some of this film, and then I'm going to get your reaction. I appreciate this, Jeff. All right? Hit it.
Evidence has been gathered. Let's begin with the hijackers. Many of them were actually trained within U.S. military bases. On September 15, 2001, Newsweek reported that U.S. military sources have given information that suggests 5 of the alleged hijackers received training at secure U.S. military installations in the 90s. Saeed Al-Ghamdi, Ahmed Al-Nami, and Ahmed Al-Ghamdi listed their address on driver's licenses and car registrations as the Naval Air Station in Pensacola, Florida. Another indication of how the hijackers were tied to U.S. bases was reported on September 12th by Fox in D.C. They stated congratulatory phone calls were made from a separate aeronautical school in Florida, which suggests inside help for the hijackers.
Now, here at Embry-Riddle School in Daytona Beach, investigators say that they did indeed intercept cell phone calls that originated out of here, calls that were congratulatory after yesterday's attacks, calls the feds say were made by terrorist sympathizers here in Daytona as well as in Broward County.
The New York Times would report that the Defense Department said that Atta had gone to the International Officer School at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama, Abdul Aziz Al-Amari to the Aerospace Medical School at Brooks Air Force Base in Texas, and Saeed Al-Ghamdi to the Defense Language Institute at the Presidio in Monterey, California. The Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at the Defense Language Institute, where Al-Ghamdi trained, went public and said, Bush knew of the impending attacks on America. He did nothing to warn the American people because he needed this war on terrorism. He was quickly disciplined and threatened with court-martial. Even when neighbors called the CIA on hijacker Walid al-Shiari, nothing was done.
Now, you might think that some of the neighbors would be shocked to find out that a suspected terrorist lived right down the street from them, but at least one woman we spoke with was not surprised at all. Diane Albritton was so concerned about what was happening inside the home at 502 Orange Street, she called the CIA. Why was she suspicious?
The odd coming and going, the different rental cars, the odd-looking people that came and went.
At that time, she says, the agency was not interested.
How could it be that the CIA wasn't interested in this woman's story? Other government officials would go public as well. J. Michael Springman, a former head of the Visa Department in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, would blow the whistle that the United States was taking part in covert programs as far back as 1987 to funnel in and protect Islamic terrorists.
Well, it began in Jeddah when I was repeatedly told to issue visas to unqualified applicants. This went on for quite some time during most of my tour there. Under the American immigration laws, you need to demonstrate that you're going to the United States for a specific purpose. And typically, in such a situation, you're going to sign a business deal, or you're going to go as a tourist to see the Grand Canyon, or you're going to the United States as a student to study a particular course of study. And these were people that had no job in one instance. He was a Sudanese who was unemployed in Saudi Arabia and a refugee from the Sudan. But he got a visa for national security purposes after it was taken out of my hands by the chief of the consular section.
At basis, though, I really think that these were more CIA assets, people that were recruited, like all of the folks I've been issuing visas to a couple of years previously. And these people were tools to be done for a job. Well, the visas issued to the hijackers in Jeddah came about as a result of it being a CIA consulate. It was the 5th largest visa issuing post in the Middle East. It was pretty much a closed system, and they simply brought them through there, knowing that they would be protected by the agency, that people would get their visas, or if they didn't get the visas, they could be made to be given visas.
Once I got back to the United States and was out of the Foreign Service, I ran across a couple of people with ties to the American government that told me another story, that the CIA was recruiting fighters for the Afghan war against the then Soviets, and that their asset, Osama bin Laden, was working with them.
In the early 1980s, bin Laden worked with operatives from U.S. intelligence, the Pakistani military, and Arab states. They ran a wide-ranging covert network that recruited and financed Muslim fighters to battle the Soviet army.
It is now known that Osama bin Laden...
All right, let's stop it right there just for a second. Now, I'm going to give you a chance to talk about 90 seconds in this segment. I'm going to hold you over for the next segment. Why doesn't the media talk? I mean, they always talk about the PDB, but have you heard any of that in the mainstream media? And obviously the mainstream media covered it at one point, but it's never been played up upon. So go ahead.